Hello and welcome to my personal cinematic journal, 10,000 Flicks. My name is Connor Zagari, and this is a spin-off of the Filmgasm podcast where I am trying to watch as many films as possible that I have never seen, with my goal, of course, being 10,000 Flicks. Today's film is not a random selection, though it is number 8,449 on my list. 2002's Stealing Harvard, a long-forgotten early 2000s comedy starring Jason Lee and Tom Green as they embark on all sorts of wacky hijinks in order to come up with 30 grand for reasons I will get into shortly. But first, I'd like to thank Austin and Adam Johnson for recommending this film for this little itty-bitty podcast here. Admittedly, my taste varies. It can be really hard to pin down. Sometimes I'll agree with the critics, sometimes I'll disagree, sometimes I'll love some, obscure, weird-ass French movie. Most of the time I'll hate it, so giving me recommendations can be kind of tough. In this case, Stealing Harvard, not great, but, I kind of expected that. I'd never heard of this film prior to their recommendation, and it made me laugh a couple times. It's not exactly a genius comedy, It got outshined big time, but they love it to death, and they wanted to hear my thoughts, so this is for them. I hope you like what I have to say. I know this is one of those sacred comedies to you guys, because, you just go back and listen to our recent episode on Uncut Gems. The last half of that episode is pretty much just Austin and Adam quoting Stealing Harvard at each other while I just kind of sit there and smile at how happy they are about that whole movie. It was quite entertaining. So first up, I guess, is let's read my Letterboxd review of this movie. Here we go. I've always found Tom Green to be obnoxious, irritating, and just plain creepy. I sat through Freddy Got Fingered long ago for a podcast, and I still cringe every time he shows up in Charlie's Angels. Stealing Harvard might be the only thing he was ever a part of where his dumb shtick actually works. Pairing him with Jason Lee as the straight man was a smart move, resulting in a comedy that's not as funny as I was hoping, but still succeeds thanks to the good performances, awesome cast, and chuckle-worthy moments. Lee plays John, a middle-class medical supply worker who works for his fiancée Elaine's father, played by Dennis Farina. He saved $30,000 to buy a house for Elaine and finally escape her father's shadow. But then he learns his niece got into Harvard, and when she was a kid, he apparently swore an oath to pay for her college. Now John's going to lose the money to his niece's dreams, unless he can somehow find another 30 grand by any means necessary. His best friend Duff, Tom Green, concocts a number of crazy schemes to get the money, but none of them pan out the right way. It's all quite ridiculous in very early 2000s. Stealing Harvard is not as bad as critics have made it out to be. I'd never heard of it until my friends recommended it to me, and I don't know if I'll be returning the favor to other friends, at least not yet. I do think I'll watch it again at some point. It's probably funnier if you watch it with a group, which is pretty much what Austin and Adam told me. I always find watching comedies by yourself can be kind of weird. Laughter is usually generated among people, You kind of you share that moment, you look at each other, you start laughing, you can't stop laughing. Those are the best moments. Laughing by yourself makes you look insane, even when you're, when nobody can see you do it. I don't know if that's just me, but watching comedies by myself, I'll laugh, but I'll also, I won't burst out laughing very often. So some notes on Stealing Harvard. The opening song is My Way by Butch Walker, a band I've never heard of, doing a song I never heard of, but it is as early 2000s as you can get. A very Third Eye Blind, Sum 41, Blink-182 vibe, but the band that if Sugar Ray said no, you'd hope you could probably likely get for your daughter's 15th birthday party. So Tom Green, I've always had problems with. I think he's just an obnoxious weirdo. I don't think he's malicious. He's not He's not hurting anybody. He's just fucking odd. And I don't like the whole, let's do weird shit because I want attention shtick, which is what Freddy Got Fingered was all about. I can't believe I watched that fucking movie. That was back when Caleb and I were running Beyond the Bad, our podcast. We were talking about a different bad movie every week. Bad being very subjective, but in that case, it was on fucking par. Freddy Got Fingered is such a surreal, uncomfortable movie of just Tom Green doing wacky, dumb, stupid shit, all in the sake of some weird modern day Salvador Dali mindset of like, I'm so weird, what an artist am I? And obviously it tanked, pretty much torpedoed his career, which was the best thing about it. But around that time, Tom Green kept popping up in shit. Road Trip, Charlie's Angels, this movie, and thankfully most of it failed. He became kind of poison, and he quietly faded into obscurity, and there he stayed. So, thank you for that, society, for finally saying, yeah, we've had enough. Jason Lee, on the other hand, he had that whole run with Kevin Smith, Mallrats, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob, Chasing Amy. He was good in those. Fantastic as Syndrome in The Incredibles. One of the best, maybe the best Pixar villain ever. Certainly the darkest. And I think after My Name is Earl, he just kind of, like Tom Green, faded away. Although I think that had more to do with Scientology than it did any kind of antics. Then again, I haven't looked into that, so I couldn't really tell you. But the rest of this cast, you've got Richard Jenkins, you've got Dennis Farina, you've got Leslie Mann, Megan Mullally. I hope I'm saying that right. And John C. McGinley. Like, it's a great cast and a crazy premise that can only work in 2002. And it's not bad. After I reviewed the movie, and I got my thoughts on paper, I looked up the scores just for curiosity's sake. 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is embarrassing. I don't know how accurate that is. I think critics are really fucking harsh on comedy movies. Comedy's insanely subjective. What makes you laugh might not make me laugh, and vice versa. To judge comedy on those terms is kind of impossible. Same with horror. What scares you won't scare me necessarily, and it's all, who's to tell if it's good? I don't know. Not me. This isn't that. This is just me talking to nobody in front of a microphone. Moving on. So John is this, everyman guy who's very happy with his life, his very boring, basic life. He's engaged to his boss's daughter, and finally saved enough money to buy a house. And on that same day, he goes to check in with his trailer trash sister, played by Megan Mullally. And I discovered something very interesting about myself. I was very attracted to trailer trash Megan Mullally. I don't know what was going on there, but I was in. Something about that look got me. Yeah, oh, damn. Nick Offerman's a lucky man. But on that day, his niece, Doreen, I think her name was, gets into Harvard. And considering nobody else in that family is good enough to really graduate high school, that's a big deal for him. And then they play some home movies, and John learns, or relearns, that when she lost a spelling bee in elementary school, he cheered her up by promising one day to pay for her entire college. And he swore an oath. So, whoopsie. Now John has to take this money, 30 grand, and give it to Doreen for her college fund. And considering this is Harvard, that's not going to cover half a semester. It never comes up. 30 grand isn't going to make a dent in a Harvard tuition. But that would ruin the movie. You can't make, stealing community college. You can't make that movie. So now John has to make a choice. Do I break my fiance's heart, or do I break my niece's heart? And that's a tough spot to be in, admittedly. So he goes to his best friend Duff, who's this idiot landscaper who just spouts off crazy shit because he's Tom Green. And they start concocting some wacky schemes to go get another 30 grand so everybody can be happy. First plan is to break into this rich guy's house and just take it in a safe that's never locked. And John goes in there, is immediately taken hostage by the rich guy, who turns out to be a very disturbed Richard Jenkins, who takes captive anyone who breaks into his house and forces them to dress up as his late wife and spoon with him. And it's actually pretty goddamn funny. There's a bit where Jason Lee's the little spoon, Jesus, and Richard Jenkins is kind of quizzing him about their honeymoon or something. He says something like, "Wasn't it great boating up the coast?" And Jason is like, "Yeah, it was great." And Jenkins cocks the gun and puts it to his head and says, "We drove," or something like that. And that caught me off guard and had me cackling. That was pretty good. I love Richard Jenkins, especially in comedies. You know, I watched Step Brothers recently for the upteenth time. I love that movie, and the whole when I was a kid, I wanted to be a dinosaur thing always cracks me up. Just him being a fucking T-Rex at the Catalina wine mixer. Oh my god, Richard Jenkins, Academy Award nominee Richard Jenkins, just doing wacky shit in 2000s comedies. That's pure happiness right there. So when that fails, they decide to rob a gas station with the help of Seymour Castle, who plans this whole thing. Old school 60s actor, worked with John Cassavetes. Was not expecting to see that dude pop up in this. So John and Duff go rob a convenience store that guy owns. The lottery money is what they're trying to get at. And Martin Starr behind the counter has a giant shotgun, nearly kills them. They take off. Nobody gets the money. John C. McGinley is a cop put on the case, and bald John C. McGinley is fucking intimidating. I mean, holy shit. I love John C. McGinley to begin with, but as a bald cop, there's something just very scary about this guy. I don't know why. There's an intensity in his eyes that he usually, he always has, but in this case, was like, Jesus Christ. So now John's running out of options. He goes to see his sister, and his sister's, slutty trailer trash, to put it lightly. And as he goes to see her, two dudes walk out of her bedroom buttoning their pants. One of them's Nick Offerman, her real husband, and Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec, hilarious dude. And the other guy is future comedy directing legend Paul Feig. So pretty cool cameos there. That was nice. At this point, Dennis Farina is getting suspicious because John's appearing, he's staying out all night and lying to his daughter, so he starts snooping around, goes to that house, and he ends up the little spoon with Richard Jenkins. He has to dress up, and yeah, it's just anybody who ends up tangled with Richard Jenkins ends up the little spoon. It's funny. God damn it. So I'm not gonna lie, around that time, it was pretty late. I was starting to fade in and out. I can't stay up as late as I used to, but it's still the use of Party Hard by Andrew W.K. in the final heist scene where they decide John finally spills the beans to Leslie Mann, and she's like, well, fuck it, I'll help you steal money. Everybody can be happy. Let's do this. It's actually quite a nice moment. So they decide to rob her dad because he's got 50 grand stashed away in his office. And yeah, I love that song, Party Hard. So he gets arrested. John gets arrested. He takes the rap for this whole thing, and he goes to his trial, and who's the judge? Richard Jenkins. And they lock eyes, and there's a moment of like, I know you. And John just writes down on a legal pad, I have the picture, and all charges are dropped. It's delightful. And of course, because it's a comedy, everybody ends up happy. John wins another 30 grand at the racetrack. Doreen gets to go to college. He and, what's her name? Elaine get to buy the house. Everybody wins. It's very nice. All wrapped up in a nice little early 2000s comedic bow. I think it's a PG-13, so, it's funny. I think R-rated comedies are funny, just like R-rated horror movies I think are better. I don't like anybody being held back by any kind of, rating system. Like, just go for broke. Do the movie as crazy as you want to make it. And if they did go for PG-13 from the get-go, all rock and roll. Congratulations. It was great. Well, it wasn't great. It was 3 stars. 3 out of 5 stars. So, not great, but not terrible. I'd probably watch it again. I do own it. I have this on DVD. I found it, I think, in the clearance shelf at Half Price Books, or stumbled onto it at Goodwill. I know I paid less than $3 for it. I blind buy a lot of movies because I'm like, maybe this will be good. And I'm right more often than I'd think. I have pretty good instincts for this shit. And this I bought on a recommendation. And yeah, good call, guys. So that's all for Stealing Harvard. It's nice to finally get a good one here where I don't have to just complain for 15 minutes. And I think the next one is going to be up there, I'm hoping. Next up on 10,000 Flicks is number 9,199, Tremors 2 Aftershocks from 1996. I've never seen the Tremors sequels. I've seen the first one several times. It's a delightful, cool, weirdo horror film. And I've heard the sequels are pretty fun if you like the first movie. So Tremors 2 is first. It's on Tubi. I recommend watching it before you hear me either complain or celebrate it. We'll find out whenever this next one drops. In the meantime, if you want to suggest films, you know where to find me. Filmgasm@gmail.com, or send me a message through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Letterboxd. Filmgasm Productions, or for Letterboxd, Connor95. I'm very vocal on all that stuff. I will thank you and prioritize your recommendation. So thanks for listening. I'm looking forward to. We got a lot of cool projects lined up in the podcast. A lot of cool stuff. A lot of staying in one lane for a while stuff that I'm excited to announce soon. But in the meantime, take it easy and have a good one.